Well, joining me is Associate Professor Baozhen Luo at Western Washington University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we just heard the report there of the national push to get China's elderly to become more tech-savvy. What are your impressions? Is this also a way to boost their contributions, integrate them into this digital economy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very smart of the Chinese government to push those kind of services in the community, training program in the community, to incorporate the elderly population in China's economy, which is heavily digitized nowadays. And the good news is that today's Chinese elderly population, and increasingly in the next 10, 15 years and even longer, we see the elderly population much better educated and that much more familiar with purchasing services from the market than the previous generation, who probably didn't have much experience with the market. And they're also richer, right? So it is very smart for the government to sort of incorporate them into the former economic sectors.
I'm quite curious about this point because, compared with the generations before them, what is it like to be a senior citizen in China today? As you mentioned, it's a vastly different economic state from just even 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So today's elderly population, there's a term when we look at the elderly population in our field of social gerontology. It's cohorts, different cohort. They are impacted by different kind of historical events when they come of age, especially when they're in the workforce. And those experiences, those interactions of personal lives with the historical events will impact them across their lifetime, especially in later life. So a lot of elderly populations, say those were born before 1949, or those who are right now would be in their late 70s, 80s. Many of them retired before China's economic reform, or at the very early stage of China's economic reform. So they really don't have a lot of understanding of how to navigate this kind of pretty rampant market competition. How they don't have the habit of go to the market to sort of purchase service or goods. But then for the baby boomer generation, China's baby boomer generations, roughly those who were born roughly between 1949 and 1965, and that population, many of them, during their sort of active working years, they were a big part of the economic reform, the market sort of economy. So they will have a much easier time sort of in their later life to adapt to this kind of economic life.
Right. I just want to, we have about a minute left now. China does have the world's largest elderly population. People are living longer, healthier. How is the healthcare system coping with this graying demographics?
Well, I think China has made strides in developing a more comprehensive healthcare system, especially by having more of a universal healthcare, despite there are a lot more improvements still need to make in coverage, to expand the coverage, and in particular for the more vulnerable population in rural areas or migrant workers. So while China made a lot of progress, while there's still a long way to go, there's still a lot more effort needs to be made. In particular, my research area focuses on long-term care. And China has experimented on different kind of mechanism to provide comprehensive long-term care coverage to its diverse population. But after 30 years of sort of testing the water, try to cultivate a service infrastructure, I think, and also piloting public long-term care insurance. Well, I think there still need to figure out a way to have a more clear top-level design.
Right.
And I think a core piece of that top-level design concerns how to build a care economy in which humanistic value of care and economic value of growth are well balanced.